My dad was a do-it-all thing, and he could do about anything. He could do carpenter work, and mostly he sawmilled. We had him sawmill, and I boss bared when I was 12 years old and loaded logs. He'd built an old army truck, and it had four-wheel drive, but anyway, that's what we done till we'd cut wood and haul to Prairie Grove because they didn't have any natural gas then. And so on every Saturday, he had a cut-off saw hooked up to a Caterpillar, and we would saw 4 rick of wood and just throw it in the truck and bring it to town and go sell it, because the only other source of heat for Prairie Grove was coal. And most people didn't want to burn coal, so we hauled 4 ricks of wood at a time to Prairie Grove. Well, he moved it from place to place, and I have a sawmill now. And when I first remember, he was down Coal Creek, way down around where the Pierces and the families lived down there. He'd go down there and stay for a week, and he'd stay with one of the people down there, and then he'd come in on the weekend, and usually he'd come in with a basket full of fish, and I think they fished with dynamite. But Mother would cook them, carp, anything that he brought in for the weekend. That's what we ate. Well, we mostly circled around the sawmill because I'd have to get in wood at night, and we had an old cow, and we'd milk this one cow, and just anything that needed to be done. Back then, my mother worked out all the time, and if I wanted to go on a date or anything, I had to iron my shirts and pants and put the stiffener in them, what is they called it? When you wanted your clothes to not have no wrinkles in it.
Starch.
Yeah. And I had to do my own clothes. And but anyway, we put out a garden, just kind of the normal things around. Oh yeah, I lived at 2 different places. We lived at Center Point. When I was older, I was born, well, like I said, in a little old backwoods place, but shortly after that, we moved on a homestead. You could homestead the land, and that had 40 acres that he'd homesteaded. And him and Mother would fasten me in the house, and I'd stand in the window bawling while they cut a load of wood to take to town. Of course, they used the old cross-cut saw and chopping axe, and that's how they made their living, is cutting wood and all from the first starting. But then it progressed, it got the sawmill, and then from then, for that day, I guess I was the luckiest kid around, because he made good money sawmilling. And I had a lot of things that other kids didn't, that we had a pretty good living. Good town. They had the Southern Mercantile had lots of different things going on that block there. And I had a business when I was real young. And Skelton's had a dry goods store. You go in there, and Elton Skelton would holler from, it had 2 stores, and he'd be upstairs and he'd call your name every time you walked in. Come in, Lee, or come in, whoever walked in. Real friendly. And the Southerns down there, they had a wagon yard out back, and they had a deal that you tie your horses to. And they sold tractors and all kinds of equipment. I think back then it was an off-brand tractor they sold. I can't remember the name of it. They had garages and service stations, and I had a garage for 16 years on Main Street. And I worked on cars, and then I had record service. And anyway, I could go out and lift a lot of stuff, with that truck. It was a boom truck. And I had a factory-made boom, which most people just had 2 pipes running up there in a snatch block. But I had one that had the original. It was about 30 foot tall. And then I could put an extension on it and lift stuff 50 feet. And I had that business, and then me and the Skelton boy, Donnie Skelton, he was a few years younger than I was, and we started a salvage. We'd go out and buy A models and T models as when they was popular. And we'd buy 2 a lot of times. Body'd be good on one, the motor would be shot on the other, and then we'd take a good motor and put the good one and sell one. And we made some money that way. And I guess me and him started the first business that I worked at. We bought a Texaco station. Released a Texaco station. And we were selling gas and oil and doing lube jobs and all kinds of stuff in the Texaco service station. And I was under 20 quite a bit. I was probably around 16. And we was the only 2 persons in Prairie Grove that had a motorcycle. And we had lots of fun, but we couldn't do anything. But they knew it was one of us because we was the only one that had a motorcycle. And we growed up. He was quite a bit younger than I was. But we was the best of friends, and then they owned the dry goods store, and his dad did. And so we had access to a lot of stuff that nobody else did in Prairie Grove, because they had money backing us, and we made a good living. And then they had the cannon factory going. And there was a sawmill in Prairie Grove, and they both had steam heat. And they used steam engines to power their deal. And the cannon factory would be running, and they'd both had steam engines and boilers. And they'd set them whistles off at morning and noon. And one of them would say, toot, toot, toot. And then the other one would do different, on the steam whistles. And they could make it sound like a train coming through town or anything else, Everybody kind of enjoyed that. It was something different. But there was lots of memories. lots of memories. At the time I went to school, I had a deal that in later life that I had dyslexia. And so I didn't do good at all in school. I got a GED in the service. When I went to service, I went and got a GED and done real good on that. But we played baseball and basketball, but the basketball was them old flint rocks out there and the goalpost on both ends. And if you fell and got down, you just had flint rocks sticking in your knees. And it wasn't a very good place to play ball. Then we played baseball, or maybe in softball, I don't remember now. But we had all kinds of horseshoes. We had horseshoe stakes. And one time one of the older boys, I was always kind of a knothead, you know. And if you crossed me, I'd fight with you. My dad was a preacher. And I took a lot of heat from him being a preacher. You know, I got a lot of criticism and made fun of. And it got till I got a whipping about once a month at least for fighting. So I quit school in the 9th grade. I think I went through the 9th grade twice. But Dad would go hundreds of miles to preach, or to he never took up a collection. In fact, if he seen a needy family, he would give them money. And a lot of people come to Dad for stuff. Had one guy that worked for Dad on the sawmill, and he come up and he needed to borrow some money. And the bank, he didn't have no collateral, and the bank wouldn't loan him the money. So Dad drawed up a contract. He wanted $500, which was a lot of money back then. And after Dad passed away, Dad had made him a note. He wrote that note to me and said, I want you to have this. I guess I've still got it somewhere. But he said, your dad loaned me $500. And he said, I've got the ticket here where I paid him off. And so things like that my parents was good people. And we had a fairly good sized house, Centerpoint. Dad had built it from scratch. He'd had sawmills, so he just built his own house. And we moved there. But before that, he built a log house when I was about, I guess I was 7 or 8. Made his own wood shingles. He had the maul that you split, and he had an axe that he cut the trimmed logs down, you know, or go in there. I remember watching him build that old house, and it's 2-story. And but that's how we kept it lit. It was kerosene lamps, outdoor toilets. That was it. I guess I moved to Prairie Grove on Summit Street, and I moved the house in, and I guess that would have been late 50s. Well, it was a good place to take your girlfriend and have fun, but anyway, they had just one building up there. It's one that they, and otherwise it was growed up. You couldn't get through it. It was just completely little brush on up to big trees. And had one guy that done moonshine up there, and I drank some of it. It's terrible. And they'd make that old rock dust whiskey. And you done a lot of dating up there, and it's just kind of throwed out. Now that building, that rock building, my dad built that. And also the ladder barn, my dad moved that in and built it, made the logs, done it all. And all of them buildings, we moved in. Dad moved houses too. And I did too. And we'd go to different places and get the logs, bring them in, and some of them was rotting out. He'd use some more himself. That rock building, the tall building, or tall rock wall, you know, it's real tall in there. My dad moved that from Ray's Mill. He numbered every one of them rocks and had a diagram of where each one of them went when he put it back up. And he had a boom truck with a long extension on it that he'd take them rocks up one at a time and set them in more than one, exactly the way he took it down. And to that deal, that's my monument to me for my dad, because it was a special thing back then when he done that. And me and him moved buildings in up there, and he had house moving stuff, and I did too. There he had lots of families that leased the ladder barn, you know, and have family meetings and stuff like that. And so he was well versed in Battlefield Park. Well, you know, back then they made cross ties, and they used foot adze, and so he'd just use the logs like he was making a cross tie, and then put them together and put clay mud instead of cement. They used clay mud to seal the cracks between the joints that didn't quite fit, you know. It's in the 50s, late 50s. Well, he was in charge of it. Everything went through Fred. He worked through the state on it, and he wrote the checks. Saturday was always the big day for people that didn't live in Prairie Grove. They'd come to town. And the Southern had a hitch rail there where you tied your horses to. One time, I shouldn't tell this story, but there's a lady and she's real nice. And they had a garage up there. I could call some names and you'd know them, but I'm not going to. And She went in, they had took a T-model coil and round wires around the toilet seat, which is just a board with a hole cut in it. They didn't have the lids or anything like that. It was just a board on the toilet seat. And they put that in there, and she started doing her job, and they turned the electric on her and shocked her, and she jumped up, run out the front door, still pulling her clothes. And they do things like that. But now they'd send you to jail right quick, you know. But there was all kinds of this and that. Every Saturday, they had a drawing, and they had an old spring there in Mox Park, and they had an old cup, one with a handle on it. You reached down there and got you a drink of water. With that, everybody drank out of the same cup, same pray. None of them died from water poisoning that I know of. And then they'd have that drawing, and the merchants would furnish tickets, and they'd draw for money, and they'd get up there and you'd take your ticket, and if you got your name called, well, you'd win something. And that was pretty standard in Prairie Grove. We was a bunch of kids one time. And of course, Prairie Grove was a little town. And everybody was in the movies. And back then they had all the old cars was a standard shift. And at the Southern, Florence kept cement blocks. And there's about 6 or 8 of us kids went around and picked the back up of a car and would set them cement blocks with that curve into the rear end of it and let it down on them, which kept the tires off the ground about that. Well, we had every car on Main Street done that way. We didn't let, every one of them was up. There's about 6 or 8 of us boys. And they'd come out and get in their old car, put it in gear, and of course, didn't go. So they'd start to put it in reverse, and the gears would start grinding, you know, because the wheels were turning. Well, we got that done, and we went around, and there was an older man, and he had an old Plymouth, and it wore out. It smoked like everything. But we took every car down and eventually put the blocks back where we got them. Well, we come to his car, and don't you touch my car. So we lined up a bunch of boys in front of a drugstore, and he had one of them old jacks that you put under there, and about the time you got it jacked off, it'd flip over, you know, and they had one of them crawled up in under the old car, and the other turned the jack, and they like to never got that old car down. And at that time I had a service station, and he'd done lawnmowing, and he always brought his lawnmower for me to sharpen the blades on it. But it made him so mad, he wouldn't bring any lawnmower. I didn't care one what the other he brought. But I hated that he got so mad about it, but he did. That was the bad part of that. As a kid and all, it was probably the best town in the country. The merchants was all good. I mean, they went along with anything that was reasonable. They had good night watchmen, door rattlers, and we were secure. Just good people. Just good people.